Hey guys, I'm back. It's your tired teacher here. It's about 11 o'clock at night and I'm ready to go ahead and go to sleep. But seriously, first I gotta talk about our extended look at period 1, which we consider the pre-Columbian period. This includes Native American tribes that were established before Columbus, set sail on the ocean blue in 1492. These tribes were prominent here in North and South America, and we're going to wrap up this time period with European exploration, mainly with Spanish exploration in the New World. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at this in-depth look at period 1. So, around this time, there was about 90 million people in North and South America, native populations that were around prior to Columbus in 1491. So we would find about 10 million of these people in present-day United States areas. Some scholars place it around 18 million. There'd be an estimate of around 30 million people just in Mexico, 11 million people in Central America, 1.5 million people in the Caribbean, 30 million in the Andes of South America, so we're talking around where the Incas are, and 9 million in the rest of South America. So really, this wasn't a barren land. We actually did have a lot of people here in North and South America prior to European contact. Now, how did these people get here? Well, you may remember from world history that they crossed the land bridge, right? That was across the Bering Strait. Now, people are going to start migrating during the Ice Age, and this happened like around, 12,000 to 14,000 years ago. Would be the first major migration. Then we'd find another one happen around 5,000 BCE and 3,000 BCE. So there's many people crossing over the land bridge, and of course they were following the herd, they're following their food supplies, and then finding these new lands to settle in. And of course they're going to quickly adapt to their environment. Now, from world history, you guys remember the major civilizations here in the New World. There's the Mayans in the Yucatan Peninsula, we had the Aztecs in Mexico, more so where present-day Mexico City is, and the Incas were up in the Andes Mountains in Peru. So, thinking about the Aztecs, they built this great city, Tenochtitlan, which this sketch right here in 1524 shows the grandeur of the city before Hernan Cortez and his fellow conquistadors marched on in and basically took over the place, right? Because they thought he was a god. They thought he was Quetzalcoatl. So we do see how this city is built up, in the middle of a lake. And this is a very complex society. And you could see the causeways connecting to the mainland. They would bring in aqueducts for fresh water. So Tenochtitlan was very impressive to the Europeans when they first saw it, and easily comparable to the largest cities in Europe at the time, with its size and complexity of its architecture. So we're talking like this is comparable to London, this is comparable to Paris, this is comparable to Rome, like that kind of level. So in North America, we've got a really complex trade network in the area that would become the United States and Canada. You could see here by like these various trade routes. Essentially, somebody along the Great Lakes and along, where the Hudson River is, could essentially trade with somebody all the way out, towards the West Coast, like in present-day Washington State. This is a very complex and advanced trade network. These people knew each other. They traded with each other. So, again, were these people really uncivilized? So far they've got advanced architecture in certain areas, complex, trade routes and the building of aqueducts, plus the onset of agriculture. So in Mesoamerican maize, well, corn, right, is going to be the crop of premier importance to the native people here in North and South America. We see this extend out in Mexico as a staple crop, as well in regions in the Southwest with the Pueblo and the Anasazis, in the Midwest with the Mississippians. The Cherokee and the Choctaw will also deal with corn in the Southeast, and even up in the Northeast in present day like New York. And in that area we have the Iroquois, who are also cultivating corn. So like I said before, native populations are going to adapt to their environment. And you can see here with this picture from Mesa Verde National Park in southwest Colorado, this is Cliff Palace. And you could see this very, cool kind of style of architecture, right? They're using adobe bricks. They're building literally cliffside. They're building into the cliffside, and they're doing that not only for protection from the elements, because let's face it, rain, sun, all of that can be very harsh, but they're also doing this to protect themselves in case of invaders. So it's going to be kind of hard to bring water out to these areas, so they're going to have to also develop an advanced irrigation system and practice in terrace farming. So the Pueblo and the Anasazis are going to be able to thrive in the Southwest, the arid Southwest, by using these methods. We could see here another example of their way of living and their architecture by looking at Pueblo Bonita and the ruins there. So as far as like the Mississippians go, we could see in their city of Cahokia that, look at the image right here. Doesn't it kind of remind you of like the step pyramids in Mexico that the Aztecs and the Mayans were creating in a way, right? It's kind of got that same vibe going. So, but you notice how there's like a bunch of grass growing on it. So instead of like actual like stone pyramids per se, where everything is stone, what they're doing is they're building these huge mounds. And where you find like some of these mounds would be like around present day St. Louis, Missouri. And there's going to be so many mounds here covering about 6 square miles, and it just shows further evidence of their complex society. They did have a social organization, and also they practiced in advanced agriculture. So you can even see evidence of their advancement through their artwork. And look at this. This is a Great Serpent Mound in southern Ohio. And this thing stretches 1,300 feet long. So this is the largest effigy earthwork in the world, and it's sitting in Ohio. So anyways, the Mississippians, you could see just to a degree that they practice their artwork as well as through their pottery. With this instance here where we see this bottle shaped like a nursing mother. So you can see emotion in the nursing mother's eyes. And it just is a testament to, just to their advancement as a society. Also, native populations will view women as practically equals in most cases. We see native women planting crops here in this image, alongside the men cultivating the land. So with that shared sense of work, shared responsibilities, women are going to enjoy more equality than their counterparts in Europe. As well, there are certain instances where we do see women in charge of tribes. Like in this engraving right here by an early French colonist to Florida. We see this hierarchy of women, she's the queen. She outranks them all. So we do see civilizations and tribes practice this sort of hierarchy with their power structure. So we also see more artwork right here. This is an engraving by Champlain, who's French, and you could see there's a massive battle between the Iroquois and the Algonquin. And notice how they're not really attacking the French per se. Like, it looks like the French are like kind of fighting alongside, right? Like one of the warring tribes. So the French are kind of unique with their exploration and colonization of North America with their territories, because unlike what we will see with the Spanish and with the English later on, the French actually do kind of treat the Native Americans with more respect and regard them more as trading partners and business partners in a sense. There's more intermarrying between the French people and the Native people. And I mean, we see this mutual respect and kind of like admiration of each other. So by and large, the French are going to have the best relationship with the native populations. And then last but not least, I mean, here's the Chinook, and they have what are known as flatheads. Think of this as kind of like your North American tribe, like Chinese foot binding in a way, because you could see how with the sketch above, this is their process on shaping these flat heads. So, I mean, we will also see evidence of that here in the New World. It wasn't just China that was kind of contorting certain body parts. So, along this west coast, I mean, you do see native populations here in the Great Basin, which is a big desert, but they're still going to thrive because they're going to forage, they're going to hunt, they're going to be very nomadic. They have small bands, but they are living kind of more so the Paleolithic lifestyle. They're going to remain pretty free. And I mean, this is a good look at the native, populations of the New World. So what's going on in Europe at this time is that we're coming up with different reasons to go ahead and explore and venture out. I mean, we all heard of the 3 G's, right? Gold, God, and glory. So if we're to categorize like these reasons for European expansion and exploration, more wealth and expansion of trade would certainly fall under the gold part of the 3 G's, right? I mean, more money. Obviously, wealth is money. Trade, you get money. So with the spread of Christianity, this would be the God part of the 3 G's, right? Because certainly for European powers like Spain, religion was a very important thing. Spain was going through the Reconquista prior to Columbus sailing out. And I mean, with this new religious fervor in Spain, they're going to want to spread the word. So with the glory part, this is where I would put the explore the world and more territory reasons. And this is why. I mean, young men are going to want to explore the world, right? Because maybe they were passed up, maybe they were second born or third born, and their older brother got like everything. So to make their mark on the world and to try to gain some of these riches, they're going to want to explore the world. Plus, more territory is going to fuel a sense of nationalism, this want for your country to thrive and to gain some prominence in the world. And how do you do that? You gain more territory. And with more territory comes the rest. More wealth, expansion of trade, and you get to spread your Christianity. So how we're able to do all these things is that we have improved technology, plus, the Renaissance is kind of going on at the same time, right? Also, we have rebounded from the Black Plague. European populations have grown significantly since then, and now there's also this new push to find new markets to try to get food. So the Columbian Exchange will play a part in this as well. I mean, it's kind of like Europe kind of needed this in a way. So let's go ahead and talk about the new technologies that we see. Well, obviously we got the compass going on, we got the globe, the rudder, which helps with steering of ships, improved shipbuilding in general, which is coming from the Portuguese and, you know, other people in the Renaissance. We've got the quadrant as well, so we can determine latitude based on looking at the stars. We also have maps of foreign countries, and in part this is thanks to Marco Polo's adventures, you know, out in the Far East when he goes to India and to China. We're inspired by his writings, and, you know, countries like Spain want in on that. They want in on that kind of trade. So there is a need also for gunpowder weapons. I mean, cannons and muskets and the like, because, I mean, some of these places gonna have to use force, so you need some good weaponry on your side. And then the printing press helps to like spread these ideas, and all of this together kind of like creates the perfect setting for exploration. So the Portuguese are the ones who kind of jump on this first, and Prince Henry the Navigator is the one who's going to, like, you know, establish a naval academy for the Portuguese. So what he wants to do is try to trade with China and India. He wants to get that trade route by sea. Remember, there was already trade routes going on over land, but they were very time-consuming, right? And sometimes not so safe. So if you get a sea route to the Portuguese, this would benefit them greatly. Now, Europeans are going to borrow the idea of the compass from the Muslims, and the Muslims kind of took it from the Chinese. So you're going to see improvements in these pieces of equipment, and, well, certainly with the astrolabe, which is pictured, and quadrant as well. So talking about the shipbuilding, we're going to see ships like the caravel, which is best described like by looking at Christopher Columbus's The Niña. So remember, he sailed with the Niña, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. The Niña is a caravel, and Prince Henry is going to like develop this kind of ship. It's very light. I mean, you can sail with it. It's got the stern post rudder, multiple masting, so you could hoist your sails. I mean, this can travel farther and faster than any of the earlier ships that Europeans had. And so this is going to make it possible for Europeans to go ahead and reach the New World. Another example of ships would be the galleon, which would be a larger ship. So these are some advancements in sailing technology. So, like we talked about earlier, with the religious conflict going on in Europe and the Reconquista going on in Spain, where you're driving out the Muslims from Spain, honestly, the Moors, Ferdinand and Isabella have now united, and they're going to bring this Catholic fervor with them and push this through their explorations. So the Spanish conquistadores who sail for them are going to bring along eventually missionaries to go ahead and settle the New World to spread the word. So Prince Henry the Navigator's kind of like been trying to search for this shortcut to, you know, to India and to Asia. And how he's going to try to do this is really by sailing around the tip of Africa. So there's going to be several explorers that sail for Portugal. We've got Diaz and da Gama, who are going to get Portugal further and further towards India. Da Gama actually reaching India. So the Portuguese are now kind of rolling in the money because of this new trade that they have established. So if we're to kind of like label the causes of exploration for like AP terms, we're going to look at it like this. Our political causes for exploration would be nation state, so your nationalism part would fall under here. Divine right to rule, and the Reconquista would be more of your you know, religious part right there. So for economic, we're looking at Asian trade. We want that. We know it's going to lead to riches and power if we can control that, because the Muslims have already controlled the overland route, so Europeans need to look for something different overseas. And monarchs are going to be so supportive of trying to find these new trade routes overseas. Now, with the social and cultural aspects, religion definitely plays a role in this. I mean, we could definitely classify religion under social and cultural. So this whole notion of Islam versus Christianity with the Reconquista, Protestants versus Catholics, because we have the Protestant Reformation happening at the same time. So we're also going to see like rival nations who have differences over religion as well, like England and Spain and France. I mean, they're all going to kind of be duking it out at this time too. Not only over the chase for new land and wealth via the exploration era, but they're also going to be fighting over religious reasons as well. And plus we've got the Renaissance, which plays into this, you know, rebirth, this period of learning, and out of the Renaissance afterwards we get the scientific revolution. So let's go ahead and shift gears and talk about Spanish exploration in depth. And this is where I've got this image of Christopher Columbus. Now this is Christopher Columbus trying to convince the Spanish monarchs, well, Ferdinand and Isabella, hey, please pay for this voyage. I want to sail to, you know, what he thought was India, but really he's gonna land in the Bahamas instead, right? And I mean, Columbus is not the first European to find the New World. The Vikings had been here. I mean, they went to North America. They visited Greenland and landed, what, Nova Scotia up in Canada. So Vikings had been here already. They're Europeans. But, you know, the world at that time really didn't recognize that. So, you even have people like Amerigo Vespucci who are like around, sailing around this part of the world as well. But it's Columbus and Columbus's contact with the natives that really defines Spanish exploration. And Columbus himself isn't even Spanish. That guy's Italian, but the king and queen of Spain are like, yeah, Columbus, sail for us. So, Columbus's voyage are as follows. You could see on this map from 1492 to 1493, that is the initial voyage, and this is where he makes first contact, right? 1493, there is another return voyage, and this lasts till 1496. 1498, there's another voyage, and then 1502 to 1504. So, this 4 voyages in total, right, to this new area that Columbus has landed on. So when we think about like this new area, I mean, this is kind of like more of a European representation of Columbus's landing in the Bahamas, in the Caribbean. So yeah, it probably was not this peaceful, but we will discuss more so the accounts of Las Casas and his counterpart Sepúlveda, who kind of disagrees with him, more in depth in a couple of slides. But just wanted to throw this image out there for you guys so you can kind of keep it in the back of your minds for when we do go over that part. But let's go ahead and talk about some other Spanish explorers in the meantime. We also have Hernan Cortez, who is the conqueror of the Aztecs, like we were talking about before with the Tenochtitlan. They kind of let the dude in because they thought he was a god. They thought he was like, what, Quetzalcoatl, right? Because he's fair-skinned and They're like, oh yeah, this guy's coming back. He's going to be fair-skinned. So just kind of let him and his crew march on in. Big mistake, right? They are conquered quite promptly within a year or two. Francisco Pizarro is going to conquer the Incas in almost a similar fashion. But of course, like, the advanced weaponry plays a part in both conquests and the spreading of disease. So the Spanish, when they initially came by, were enslaving the native populations to go ahead and mine for gold and silver. And all the while they were converting them towards Catholicism and setting up kind of like this hierarchical system going on. So the native populations, under the severe stress of being overworked and, well, spreading of disease, would die off massively. So what also contributed to the Spanish success at this time would be guns, horses, and steel. I mean, just this combination right here is going to totally give Spain the upper edge when it comes to dealing with native populations. So by the time, I mean, Spain's going to like control North and South America essentially. The Portuguese will have a foothold in Brazil, but that's about it. Other than that, I mean, Spain's like ruling the show until the French show up and the English. But for the most part, Spanish Empire is massive in North, Central America, and South America. So, alongside this, there's going to also be the importation of enslaved people from Africa. Now, the Portuguese are the ones who are going to start to bring in these African slaves to the New World. And in part because since they've already had European contact, that was one source of, well, dying that was kind of eliminated by bringing in African slaves that the native populations, just couldn't deal with in general, because they didn't have the immunities, right? So African slaves are going to be brought in afterwards, and they will be the ones to cultivate the land, work in the sugar plantations out in the Caribbean, and so on and so forth. So this is kind of like what you would see on a slave ship, right? I mean, when slaves are brought up to deck, but really slave ships are very cramped. And what would become the triangular trade network in the future, I mean, it's going to be a very brutal journey through the Middle Passage. So slaves, when they are brought over to the New World, they're going to practice like some forms of resistance. And this is going to be true of slavery continuing throughout U.S. history up until the Civil War. These ways of resistance would include running away, sabotaging work or equipment being used, revolting outright, or by maintaining aspects of their African culture and heritage. And how they would do this is with music, with religion, and with folklore. So we start to see kind of like elements of marrying the two together in the instance of like religion. Africans are bringing in various forms of their religion and kind of meshing it with Catholicism, and this is where you get stuff like Santeria born out of that. So we do see some blending of cultures, but as a form of resistance, though, I mean, enslaved people are going to definitely hold on to their heritage. So we had referred to the Columbian Exchange slightly before, and certainly you guys learned about it in world history. So the Columbian Exchange is the interaction between the Old World, which is Europe, and the New World, which would be the Americas. So we're going to trade like goods, like food. Food's like the main staple of the Columbian Exchange, right? Like when you guys think about it, you think food. I mean, seriously, where would we be without beef, like cows and stuff. Like, really, we didn't have cows here. We had turkeys. We had fish and stuff. We didn't have cows. We didn't have pigs. Oh my god. Like, definitely, we kind of benefited from that part of the Columbian exchange. The exchange of food. I mean, other foods exchanged would be, you know, stuff like turkeys, pumpkins, corn, tomatoes, peanuts, tobacco. That's primarily New World goods right there. They're being exchanged for Old World goods. So horses as well were brought over by Europeans. Grapes, sugarcane. There's no sugarcane here. We had the cocoa beans, but no sugar. So very bitter chocolate back in the day. Honeybees as well were brought over. Citrus fruits. I mean, come on now. We didn't have that stuff here. But also at the Columbian exchange, you do have the negative side of it, which is disease, right? Europeans bring about this massive array of diseases like smallpox, malaria, measles, and it's going to wipe out thousands upon thousands of the native populations. And it gets so bad that within 50 years after Columbus had arrived in North America, only about 1 in 10 Native Americans survived it. So 90% of the population gone in 50 years. That's crazy. So this is more of a chart depiction for you guys about the Columbian exchange, and you can see, you know, the things being exchanged. Yeah, there was one disease that was exchanged from the Americas to Europe. We gave them syphilis. So, yeah, I think the Americas still ended up on the short end of the stick here, because when you consider the diseases we got instead, yeah. I think I would have rather had syphilis than smallpox or malaria or measles or the flu. That would have killed me. So this image right here, you see it's from the smallpox epidemic that was raging through Tenochtitlan in 1520, which did help Hernan Cortez conquer the Aztecs. So here's a quote about what was going on at that time. There came amongst us a great sickness, a general plague, killing vast numbers of people. It covered many all over with sores, on the face, on the head, on the chest, everywhere. The sores were so terrible that the victims could not lie face down, nor on their backs, nor move from one side to the other. And when they tried to move even a little, they cried out in agony. I mean, do you guys remember, like, you know, getting your first flu or like your first cold? I mean, you have no idea like what's going on, and you feel like outright terrible, right? With any new disease, getting it for the first time, you feel absolutely miserable. And in some cases, it could lead to death, like in the instance of the native populations, since they didn't have immunities built up to these diseases. These diseases wiped them out completely. So this period of great dying is going to decimate native populations. So here's what we're talking about. Okay, when looking at just one native tribe here, this is the Arawak tribe. In 1495, they had 250,000 people. Just over, 50 years later, they're down to only 500. And within another 100 years, completely wiped out. So, talking about the Aztecs, I mean, 90% of the 25 million Aztecs died within the 50 years of first contact. And because people are so sick, their economy suffered. They couldn't farm. Their trade networks broke down, and it just totally wiped them out. So here's more of a graphical representation of what's going on. You can see native people, massive downward trend, versus colonial people, Spaniards, you know, and the like. Their populations are going way up because they can survive those diseases. And they're not doing that massively hard work that the native populations are doing as well. So how does this all play into like mercantilism and where does the Columbian exchange kind of fit into this? Well, I mean, you start to see the rise of capitalism, don't you? I mean, with these trade networks, I mean, we're going to start to look at the colonies being there for the sole purpose of helping out the mother country, right? By gaining wealth for the mother country. So you do see the beginnings of mercantilism during European exploration and the following colonial period. Now, there were some Spaniards that did speak out about the treatment of the natives, and it's not just the Las Casas. We're going to have a Dominican friar by the name of Antonio de Montesinos, who kind of comes before Las Casas, but he's still talking about the brutal treatment of Native Americans. So here's a quote from him. "Tell me, by what right of justice do you hold these Indians in such a cruel and horrible servitude? On what authority have you waged such detestable wars against these people, who dealt quietly and peacefully on their own lands, wars in which you have destroyed such an infinite number of them by homicides and slaughters never heard of before? Why do you keep them so oppressed and exhausted, without giving them enough to eat, or curing them of the sickness they incur from the excessive labor you give them, and they die, or rather you kill them, in order to extract and acquire gold every day?" So people like Bartolome de las Casas are going to agree with this sentiment. I mean, he's brought over in 1502, and he sees what is happening at the hands of the Spanish conquistadors. And, you know, this is on the island of Hispaniola, where he sees these violent atrocities committed. So he's going to end up having a change of heart, and he's going to give up his encomienda that he was granted and his slaves in 1514, because he sees the cruel treatment of the native populations under the encomienda system. So, however, he does advocate for the importation of African slaves, though, and he thinks this is an okay thing because they were acquired as prisoners of war. So, it's, what can I tell you guys about, like, U.S. history? For every good, sometimes there is a bad, but we got to look through things through a historical lens. So when he does become a Dominican monk in 1523, this is when he's going to fervently speak out against the encomiendas, and he's going to speak out against, well, the slave owners as well, by refusing their confession. So when he publishes the Valladolid, he's going to bring about this massive discussion about the treatment of natives. And in 1552, with a short account of the destruction of the Indies, that's the one that is widely circulated. So here's what we see. This is kind of like the sort of images that you would see embedded in the book. And, I mean, there's some brutal sights in here, right? You've got some mutilation, you have just outright killings, hangings. I mean, you see just the brutality that these native populations faced at the hands of their Spanish conquerors. Now, on the other side of the argument, though, we've got Sepúlveda, who goes against Las Casas with the Valladolid controversy. And it's this kind of debate that they have. He also writes about this, and his book is called On the Just Causes of War Against the Indians. So he's going to argue more of this whole like superiority over American Indians, and that their conquest and their perpetual servitude to Christian Europeans is justified because of this. So this is what he has to say on the subject. As children to parents, as women are to men, as cruel people are from mild people, subjugation of Indians was warranted because of their sins as pagans, that their low level of civilization required civilized masters to maintain social order, that they required Christianity, and that this in turn required them to be pacified. So Las Casas is going to shoot back at this, and he's going to say, well, hey, these native populations had built advanced societies, civilized societies, and it's our job as missionaries to lead this peaceful mission to convert the natives. So the debate raged on, but the damage had been done to the Spanish reputation. The French and the English jumped on this whole side where the Spanish were cruel, as portrayed by Las Casas, and this is where your whole black legend kind of comes about. So as far as like economic and social systems, conquistadors are going to be granted these encomiendas, so land and, well, the right to control native populations and place them into forced labor. So the Spanish crown is the one that tells these encomienderos to Christianize the native populations that they have under their encomienda system. So now that word is out and people are starting to read Las Casas, the crown is going to agree, and they're going to replace this encomienda system instead with the repartimiento system. So this is still forced labor. But there's going to be new laws put in place, and the encomienderos are going to write against these new restrictions, and they even threaten Las Casas. So what's going to end up happening is that the crown is going to kind of assume control, and these laws will eventually be repealed, though. But this practice, through the pressure from the encomienderos, is going to persist. So when we're talking more about economic and social systems, there's going to be a mission system set up. So this is where you start to see missions dot along Spanish territory, not only to help convert the native populations in those areas, but they also serve as a means of actually claiming the areas, right? I mean, you got a building on there, technically you claim the area. So priests are going to be sent out to these areas, and some priests are going to demand taxes or labor from the natives. So some native tribes are going to also view the priests as like being cruel oppressors as well. And if you're in the Caribbean and working on the sugar and the tobacco plantations, they're going to rely mostly on slave labor. So that's where you're going to see the slaves imported too. So there's going to be this caste system developed in the New World for the Spanish colonies. And it's because there's a lot of intermarrying happening, or rather, you know, the mixing of races. So you're going to have this caste system involve the Peninsulares, who are those directly born in Spain. They're at the top. Then you got the Criollos, who are Spanish parents, but they were born in the colonies. So it's the children of those Spanish parents. Then you have the Mestizos, who are mixed Spanish and native. Then you have the Mulattos, who are mixed Spanish and African. And then you have the African enslaved populations, and then underneath them you have the native populations. So that's kind of like the simplified hierarchy, but within this, you're going to also have divisions based on appearance. I mean, look at this image. This image kind of like says it all right there. You see mestizo con española. So you've got española con moro. So I'm trying to read like some of the text on here, but you kind of get the idea, right? So we'll go ahead and leave off here for our in-depth discussion on period 1. I want to go ahead and bring in more information about the French, the Dutch, and certainly the English with period 2, because it plays more into that time period. But this has been your in-depth discussion on period 1, and hope you guys enjoyed it. Yeah, covered a lot of material today. So in case you had missed class before when we were discussing this material, here you go. This is your recap. So I'm gonna go ahead and go to sleep. It's late. So good night, guys. This is your tired teacher finally getting some rest. All right, see you guys later. Bye.